Kia ora tātou. Kua oti te tuitui a tātou kia tātou anō I roto I ngā mihi, no reira kia koke tā tātou kaupapa. Ko tongariro te maunga, ko Taupō nui atia te moana o Ngāti Tūwharetoa te iwi, ko te Heuheu te tangata, e tāwharau nei tēnei hui. Ka huri mai ki tēnei taha oku, ki te kaupapa o taku koro I te rānei, ko tauhara te maunga, ko Waikato te awa I rere nei, ko Ngātoro-i-rangi te hapū. Today I'm going to talk about my involvement in the prosecution of contact energy, my involvement as a hapū member. And the brief that I've been given is to give some helpful insights to whānau into that process for those of you who might be involved in a process yourselves. I also want to show how a tragic event allowed for us to undertake a process of healing. And so the here component of ngā wai here, I refer to here a lot in this presentation, refers to connection after a period of disconnect, and ngā kaihautu were central to that process. My background's actually in teaching. I've been 25 years in Karapiti Māori, and the connection of tamariki to this kaupapa added another dimension to the healing journey. The map that I've used shows the location of the Waipu stream in relation to the Waikato awa, me ngā tūtohu whenua, in the land blocks, and we've referred to it right throughout our journey. And the Pō Māori on the left was created by the tamariki at the Kurakaupapa Māori o Whakarewa I te reo ki Tūwharetoa. It represents their aspirations for te awa o Waipu. You'll see their fingerprints up it. And mo te tai ao whānui in its broadest sense. I think this presentation is about Māori, reflecting on it. So the history of ngā kaihautu o te awa Waikato as a marae working party goes back to the 90s, to the Raupatu claims. The Tūwharetoa Māori Trust Board represents our interests and our marae's interests in the river deed. So all of those decades have been about implanting in legislation co-governance and co-management across the river iwi. Ngā kaihautu, the name ngā kaihautu refers to our position at the source of the awa and our aspiration to send waiora on to our whanaunga downstream in the best condition possible. So these are our members on the left here, involved at the time of the spill, the Karapiti spill, and the whānau who have joined or replaced members since then. So on the left you'll see our waikoha making its way to Taupiri on the left there, and on the right, on the 19th of February about 1 p.m, whānau and members of the public were at Te Huka, and this is what they saw. People went live on Facebook and phone calls were made saying, you know, hey, our awa has turned brown. One of our whānau members followed it up till it ran clear, hung a right at the Waipu stream and identified that it was coming from a contact energy site. Contact Energy have 11 power stations throughout the country. 4 of them are on the Waiarake geothermal field, and electricity is produced in 3 stages. 1, extracting the fluid from geothermal wells. 2, separating it into fluid and steam. And 3, steam creates electricity and the fluid is sent out to the margins of the geothermal field and re-injected. So how did it happen? How did the spill happen? So on the 13th of February, the pipes at the Waiarake power station were shut down for an hour for maintenance, and when they resumed, when the flow of fluid resumed, a non return valve had shut, and so fluid was redirected to a nearby soak pond. The pond is close to a cliff. It sits above the Waipu-Wera River and gully, and it's consented to hold on 500 tonnes per day. Over 6 days, 305 tonnes per hour were discharged to the soak pond. From the investigation, we understood that the activities of that remote reinjection site are monitored from a control room. Over 6 days, 11 alarms were received at the switchboard and there wasn't a single response. On the 19th of February, about 10 a.m, the northern side of the pond eroded. It gave way and slumped into the Waipu-Wera Valley. And that's the secondary slip that it caused there. About 44,000 cubic metres of sediment, ash and pumice entered the Waipu-Wera stream into the Waikato River and downstream. A little bit uninteresting, this photo, but it's the only one I took. A little less than a month later, Contact Energy's General Manager apologised on site and committed verbally to restoring the awa. They were prosecuted under the Resource Management Act on the 16th of October 2019. They entered a guilty plea and opted to enter a restorative justice process. So restorative justice is a process used in criminal law and it enables the offender to redress harm caused to the victim. So the Waikato awa, the Waipu-Wera awa, was the victim. So in March 2020, I just want to spend a little bit of time on this slide because I think it shows some of my insights, some of the things I learned in that process. A restorative justice conference took place in March between Waikato Regional Council, Contact Energy, the Tūwharetoa Māori Trust Board, hapū members to agree on a process, a restorative justice process. Along with 2 other hapū members, I presented a victim statement from my hapū on behalf of Te Awa o Waikato and Waipu-Wera. It was a massive learning curve for me. I'd never read the RMA before. I didn't know who was in the room, which lawyer was representing who. I didn't even know what restorative justice was a thing in the environmental space. I didn't understand why they would opt for restorative justice. I'd spent days and days preparing my statement. I hadn't slept the night before. And it was very foreign. It was an uncomfortable process. We had to share our worldview with them, and it was pretty hard to separate that incident from other deeper historical grievances since 1840. Land loss, loss of mahinga kai, alienation from our kāinga, and we acknowledged it wasn't all Contact's fault, but it was important still for us to talk about that, to put it into that context. We spoke about how we were put into positions of representation by our people and how we're always in a reactionary space, sometimes made to feel personally accountable for these violations. But the worst thing was the feeling of tribal shame, that the water wasn't of the highest standard when it left us. We had to break down our values and emotions and relationships with the awa into understandable parts, and it just felt very un-Indigenous. The other thing that I felt very conflicted about was language. Contacted a cultural advisor who was ready to translate, and I know that the right to speak in legal proceedings was a battle that was hard fought for, and at most opportunities I would use that. But even though te reo Māori is the reo of the taiao, the structures of decision-making are Western, the decision makers are English-speaking, and on that occasion and other occasions I couldn't risk the message getting lost in translation. Needed to make sure that the facilitators, the lawyers, the prosecutors, the judges knew exactly what was being said. So that was my rationale. I mean, everyone will have their own, but my tikanga whakaaro was that the taiao is the root of our reo and our culture, and that had to take precedence. I also want to mention the here in terms of the gel, the binding. We had people behind us as hapū members like Maria Nepia, Tradiga, Hall and Maia Wikaira, also of Ngāti Tūwharetoa, was helping us to present evidence and step us through that process. From the hearing, a cultural impact assessment was commissioned by Contact Energy to inform the sentencing, which was a little bit backwards because the violation had already taken place. Tuanaku Limited were contracted by Contact and approved by the Hekuai to assist with that work. They supported us to articulate our values and the impact of the Karapiti incident on those values and recommended remediation. It was sensitive mahi because we needed a hapū mandated CIA. And we had a really tight time frame between May and July. Naomi and Kiri's here i te rānei. Came to 3 wānanga with our whānau, walked the spill site and the awa with us. They sought and earned the confidence of our people. We trusted them with our kōrero, and they've continued to support our hekuai hapū with some other mahi with Contact. So ngā mihi nui kia kōrua, Kiwi. That's them writing notes there. So it was difficult participating in a foreign process because it can trigger other historical issues for our whānau. Add to that a tight time frame, relationship issue, rifts, tribal dynamics. It's just difficult keeping whānau engaged and focused on the kaupapa. And I come back to the here theme again, the people who can make sure that all the parts are working together and on the same page. Especially when our people are doing this stuff voluntarily. This was Contact's day job, but we were writing statements when our tamariki were asleep and taking days off work to do site visits and that sort of thing. So that's our whānau participating in the Restorative and the CIA. Okay, so all of the recommended remediations outlined in the CIA were agreed to by Contact. This is just some of them. So a maximum fine for an offence of this nature is $600,000. The judge considered the prompt guilty plea, the volume of the discharge, that they'd failed to respond to the alarms, that it wasn't deliberate, but they had failed. They were open to working with Ngāti Tūwharetoa to remediate the damage. The cost of the clean-up, including the agreed outcomes from the restorative justice, was $2.5 million. Contact was fined $162,500. So some of the agreed outcomes are here. That they commit to the Waipu stream restoration plan that was developed by Ngā Heuheu. For all contracting and planting works, that the first right of refusal was to Ngāti Tūwharetoa. That they develop a decommissioning plan for their lands and to undertake steps to decontaminate the land. And the first right of refusal, did I say that, goes to Te Hekuai o Tūwharetoa. Cultural, Tūwharetoa liaison staff member was appointed immediately. We also insisted on a whole catchment approach to remediating the damage after years of neglect. What else is there? That contact resource Tūwharetoa to develop a mātauranga monitoring plan with cultural indicators, and we, Mahora Manuel Hepi, has been working on that project since then. Basically, this is Ngā Kaihautu's strategic plan. Kiri and Naomi also helped us with that. It's our localised vision of the next phase of our development from 2020 to 2030. That'll do about that. So aside from the remediation outcomes negotiated with Contact, the rest of this presentation will show other aspects of the reconnection with the Waipu Wera Wera. I've placed some of those highlights within the overarching kaupapa statements of our strategic plan, just to kind of test it out. So, he hononga wai, he hononga tangata. As a result of the whole catchment approach, the source of the Waipu Wera Wera stream was discovered to be a wetland. Contact worked with the landowner to develop a plan to restore and enhance the wetland. Over time, the name of the wetland had been lost. The kura kaupapa Māori had been involved in all of the restoration and planting stages, and so they invited the tamariki to take part in the naming of the wetland. It was a very powerful learning opportunity. Tradiga and I did some preliminary research with our kaumātua about the name. Auntie Gail was approached. We presented our findings to the tamariki for their consideration. Kaiako composed karakia for the planting of the Pō Māori. Iraia Bailey, he composed karakia for the naming ceremony, and that brought together the kōrero of the Waipu Wera Wera. Tamariki learnt the karakia and the kōrero that went with it. One kaiako used poi as an entry point to this learning experience, composing waiata about the harakeke and the raupo. We engaged the expertise of Yvonne Toda, who developed Te Reo o Te Repo resource, and she provided advice and support for our kaiako and wetland education. Contact sponsored wetland science kits from the Science Hub. The tamariki researched the whakapapa that connected all forms of life together in the repo. They planned the areas, they researched the formalities of naming a site, and rehearsed their roles in preparation for the formal naming ceremony and planting day. We had to cancel it because of COVID. Preparing for the restorative justice process required research. We accessed information about the geothermal properties of the Waipu Wera Wera stream and the type of kai harvested in those warm conditions, including the kokopu and the koura. We used the traditional boundary names. We often asked the tamariki if they were planting on the rangatira side or the wairake side. Another kaiako brought kōrero to the repo about the maunga, puna te kahi, and the whakapapa of the rāhoto stone that's common to that area. This photo here shows the insect that one of our tamariki found, Te Arawa who found while planting at the Waipu Wera Wera, he ngā eki eki. In his research he found that it's a very rare insect, endemic to Aotearoa. Whānau that took part in the CIA process and members of Ngā Kaihautu insisted on rongoa and mahinga kai species and the condition that these be sourced locally. Oh, ka pai. So while the Karapiti spill had a tragic impact, It gave us an opportunity to reconnect and express our kaitiakitanga through active involvement in its restoration. Restoration of its Māori, of the kōrero, of the insects, of the manu, ngā rākau, ngā hitori. It gave us an opportunity to start to heal ourselves from not only the impact of the event, but a long history of disconnect. My biggest lesson from the journey was the importance of herehere, the herehere component of ngā wai herehere. A range of walks of life and skill sets and positions were included on the journey. Our rongoā experts, our technical experts who could read the reports, our lawyer, our writers, our wetland expert, our cultural impact experts, our creatives, the people who could tito and compose artwork, our whakapapa experts, our teachers, our historians, and most importantly, our tamariki. It also confirmed for me that connecting uri to their wai is one of the most effective measures we can take to ensure the intergenerational well-being of our wai. Literally connecting our DNA to the DNA of the awa, which is the same. And disrupting the story of disconnect. So, hei whakakapi, the waipu wera wera has not only been reawakened in our ancestral memory, but we held the pen and we wrote a new narrative. Kia ora tātou.